And now we move straight into our next session, which is equally challenging: the difficulties of discussing collapse. This panel will be moderated by András Galancsér and joined by three extraordinary voices: Inigo Capellán Pérez, Ugo Bardi, and Derek Jensen. So let's continue. Derek Jensen, one of the most provocative, and visionary voices in the environmental movement, author of 20 books including Endgame and Bright Green Lies. He reminds us that the narratives we live by matter, and sometimes those myths must be dismantled to make space for new truth. Ugo Bardi, chemist, systems thinker, and member of the Club of Rome. He has dedicated decades to modeling the limits of growth and studying energy transitions. His work highlights the complex interplay between resources, technology, and societal decline. Inigo Capellán Pérez, physicist and energy system modeler, working on post-growth scenarios and ecological economics. He challenges us to imagine futures beyond infinite growth and to ground our planning in biophysical and social realism. And of course, our moderator, our professor, András Galancsér, atmospheric chemist, former rector of the University of Pannonia, and a clear voice in Hungary on reality and ecological crisis. His commitment to scientific integrity and public dialogue makes him the perfect guide for this next conversation on the difficulties of discussing collapse.
Thank you for the introduction. And we do not know each other, but we came to the same conclusion individually. We share similar background, so we are all kind of engineers and scientists. But in order to reach the conclusion, we do not need to high science. It's enough to have elementary knowledge, elementary school knowledge, to come to the conclusion that we just wrote books about. And it's a pleasure for me to talk to you gentlemen about the technical side of collapse or the problems with the way that humanity takes for the future. So I would start with a short question to all of you about the root cause of the problems of humanity. So what do you think the primary cause of all polycrisis? So just start from here.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for the invitation and for the organization of all this. It's a pleasure. So it's important question. I cannot say one cause. I see three causes very closely interconnected. I see the environmental side, the disturbance of the biosphere that we are changing, and we are modifying, we are affecting so much the normal functioning of biosphere because we are consuming resources, and this is the other side of the crisis. And in this linear model that we have, we consume resources, renewable or not renewable, and we pollute and we destroy the environment. So this is connected. And then the third dimension is the social one. And some things were already said. For me, the crisis in social side, two elements are inequalities. And we know that inequalities are a driver of collapse. And I will say the loss of quality of democracy in the places where there is democracy. I will stop here.
Hello. Thank you very much for this interesting question, and it is a pleasure to be here and to be able to give you my impression on this point. What is the problem? Not easy. You see, from my viewpoint, which I tend to see myself as a system scientist, and the systems which are interesting are those systems which we call complex. Complex system is a definition. It's a kind, a section, a sector, an element of the universe which acts on itself, and it is dominated by its internal feedbacks, changes. You cannot change one thing in a complex system. It's a basic point of biology. You cannot change one thing. If you change something, the whole system will change. And so what is the problem? The problem is that we have been doing, we humankind, the things which were obvious for us to do. Exploit the resources we found on this planet, mainly fossil fuels. It was natural, the natural thing to do. And we did it, and we expanded it to levels which are generating a huge change in the system. But in a system, in complex systems, there are no causes and no effects. There are no problems and no solutions. There is only change. And change generates more change. Your only choice when you face change is whether you adapt or you fight the change. And I think we all should agree that adapting, accepting the change, is the best strategy, because we cannot avoid it. We have used fossil fuels so much that we are gradually running down, exhausting the resources we have, and we are creating a huge amount of pollution, huge. Part of this pollution is called climate change, but it's not the only problem. There are problems, actually. Not the only one. Pollution gives you a lot of problems. Oh, every one of you in your brain, you have the equivalent of a credit card of plastics. Did you know this? In little, small, little amounts. We don't know what is the effect of this microplastic amount in our brains. I'm sure you all think it is good, right? It make us smarter, but it may not be. So we have to adapt to change, to not stop the change. And the big challenge, the big problem is this enormous challenge we face, which is moving away from fossil fuels. Then we will find something else. We will have to adapt to this change.
There's a great line by a Canadian lumberman, which is, when I look at trees, I see dollar bills. And how you perceive the world affects how you behave in the world. And if when you look at trees, you see dollar bills, you'll treat them one way. If when you look at trees, you see trees, you'll treat them another way. And if when you look at this particular tree, you see this particular tree, you'll treat it differently still. So many indigenous people have said to me over the decades that the fundamental difference between Westerners, or sort of a Western perspective, and indigenous perspectives is that most Westerners perceive the world as consisting of resources to be exploited, and traditional indigenous perspectives would see the world as consisting of other beings to enter into a relationship with. And as soon as you perceive the world as resources to be exploited, that's how you'll treat them. And that's one, I think, source of our problems. Another source of our problems has to do with civilization itself. And that doesn't mean culture. There have been an infinitude of cultures among humans. And culture is just how you pass on perceived wisdom, how you pass on ways of being. And there are presumably, I would not say presumably, there are cultures among non-humans too. But one way of life that has sort of metastasized across the globe is civilization. And civilization, as I'll say tomorrow, is a way of life characterized by the growth of cities. And cities are collections of people living in numbers large enough to require the importation of resources. And as soon as you require the importation of resources, it means your way of life can never be sustainable. And that's because if you're requiring the importation of those resources, it means you've denuded the landscape. I know I said resources is a bad way to look at the world, but we'll use it for shorthand. That if you denude the landscape of that particular resource, it means you've harmed the land base and you've made a change into that complex community, and that's going to probably have cascading effects. And if you base your life on it, you have to keep expanding. Once you lower the carrying capacity of where you live, that means you either have to collapse or expand. Good news is you now have a competitive advantage over your neighbors because there's more of you because you converted the land base into human beings. Bad news is you have to keep doing this. And eventually on a finite planet, you're going to run out of space, and we are where we are. That's the last 10,000 years in 50 seconds.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just thinking of primary causes, and I would mention economic growth or growth in itself as a primary cause for all of the problems that you just listed. And yes, we think of nature as a kind of ecosystem service. We are not talking about nature any longer, just as what service it can do for us. So that's very weird that we think of nature that we owe to or living to, that's a kind of something in the supermarket that provides services for us. But we are living in an energy-addicted world, and we are continuing doing so. So we are just increasing or the volume of our infrastructure that requires energy. And global politics are talking about transition, energy transition. But looking back in the past, has energy transition ever occurred in the history of humanity, or can you comment on that? Any of you? No, there is no order.
I'll go first this time. Go the other way or something. No. The only time I can think, and this is not really a plan that I would choose, but the only time I can think that might have happened would have been in the Black Death. Decrease of energy use by humans during the collapse of population through that. I don't know of any other time. I don't know of any time that there has been a medium to long-term voluntary decrease in human use of energy.
COVID also, with some decrease in energy.
Did it actually decrease, or did it just decrease the acceleration?
No, I think that it dropped a little, just a
also the 2008 economic collapse, the energy decreased a little bit. So it's pretty clear economic collapse leads to energy collapse or energy decrease.
I think depends on the scale you're talking about. Now, I think the interesting thing is you think about that for the past 10,000 years, humans have always been growing. From a start in which our ancestors started moving out of Africa, maybe 30,000 years ago, population has always been growing, and that is been growing because it had energy resources that it could exploit in form of food, wood, fire, and metallurgy, and things like that. So really it's an interesting question, because right now, you have the privilege to live in the first huge, enormous transition for humankind, because all the projections we have show that we are going over a peak. And eventually, within this century, depending on whom you, or maybe 2080, the United Nations says we will start going down after 2080. Other models we have say 2030, 2040, 2050, few decades, we have a reversal, complete reversal of everything that humankind has been seeing during the past 10,000 years. If you think about that, it's a privilege to be here right now.
Okay, so the privilege of being actors, no? Participate. So, well, I'm not a historian about energy, but I think I can say that there is a lot of studies now relating anthropology with energy, and it is well proven that there is a link between the level and type of energy consumption and what we call the socio-ecological metabolism. I will now give some examples that this level of energy can support. So in the past, there have been changes from these levels. The typical levels are, for example, the most basic level is hunter-gatherer. No? The hunter-gatherers had very low external energy consumption, if any. And then you can have first agriculture, more in complex agriculture, industrial society. So each of these metabolisms require different levels of energy and different types. Because, for example, in the early agriculture, you didn't need too much transport. But in the industrial one, obviously, you need a lot of transport, oil, etc. So there are examples in the history when different societies are going from one level to other. Not always has to be a catastrophic collapse. For example, in the Roman Empire, the cities, maybe some cities disappeared, but people moved to spread over the countryside in villas. Or so just the metabolism, the basic structure of the local economy changed. And that changed also the energy.
Yes, but humanity just started to get rid of fossil fuels and to start a transition in 1992 in the first climate summit held in Rio. And since then, emission and fossil fuel use has increased by some 66%. So there is obviously an unsuccessful try of decarbonizing the world, of transition from fossil energy to some green energy. So what do you think the main reasons are for this obviously unsuccessful attempt of humanity to decarbonize? Because it's already more than 30 years since we resolved to decarbonize, and ever since we are still on the rise in using fossil fuel. That even coal use was hit a record last year, so that there is no change even in the direction of using fossil reserves. So what is your opinion on that?
So I think I have a straightforward answer. Is because, two reasons. The world has not tried that seriously. One thing is to make promises.
But can they?
Well, this is the second point, but the first point is delay the problem. I think in the 90s it was delay the problem also because everybody thought that this problem was going to appear much later. And now with more knowledge, we know now we are already in 1 degree of increase. And that was not the projections in the 90s. So the things are going faster. So one strategy was delay the problem. And I think no country is seriously implementing the green growth agenda. Not even the European Union, who has put on the table a lot of projects, but we hear a lot about hydrogen, but how much hydrogen is there there is nothing. So there is a lot of talking, a lot of wish, a lot of plans, but they haven't tried. And then the second part is, what will happen if they seriously try? And this is what, for example, I work, and tomorrow, for those who are coming, I will try to explain a bit this. If they will seriously try, there are many factors which are not taken into consideration, which will make that scenario or that strategy very unlikely or unfeasible. And why they are not trying really, and this is what Derek said, because it will be, in the current setup, it will be more costly. Why they don't want to produce hydrogen? Because it will be 10 times more expensive or 5 times. So it's a question of nobody wants to do that because then it will be less competitive. And this is, the green growth has this paradox. It wants to solve the problem within the market, but the market does not allow, it's against the market to do this transition in the way they think. So this is my opinion.
All right, so that's a long story. I think it starts in 1972 with the first report to the Club of Rome. You might have heard of it, the limits to growth. You know the story a little bit. At that time, they had already identified the main factors that were leading the system, the economic system or the ecosystem as a whole, through a certain trajectory that was going up and then would start going down. The interesting part is that they also provided recipes on how to avoid what the model produced. The model produced collapse around 2010, 2020. We are still in time, a little bit late, but it's okay. We are still on schedule. And that, I think, was the wrong part of the report, because they said we humankind, we should do this or that side, reduce emissions, reduce industrial production, control population. There was a basically wrong idea with giving to humankind a sort of personality, which humankind doesn't have. Because if you think about that, humankind does not exist. People exist, individuals. Every individual is making choices depending on its economic clout, and humankind moves in a certain direction because of individual choices. And the scenarios that were provided in the 1970s said, okay, we can avoid collapse if we stop growing, but that was not acceptable to the majority of people. They could not understand the point. They could not believe that that was something that somehow could be done, because there were no structures able to stop growth. Zero. It's impossible. You cannot do that. And we are there. Then there was the ecological movement, which said, all right, we cannot do this, but we can save the world if when we are in a hotel, you don't have your towels washed, and such micro decisions at the individual level, which are probably worse than useless. And they gave to the environmental movement a bad fame, which there is a reason why we have Mr. Trump in the White House. And if something bad happens to you, normally it is because you made a mistake. It's not by chance. So if Trump happened to us, it's because of the mistakes we made. And so there is not much that we can do except follow the wave. And I think the wave is taking us somewhere where we have to go anyway. But there are limits to what we can do. There are limits to growth and limits also to what we can do to avoid going in overshoot, which is what we did. We are now at the peak, and we are soon going to go down, but our task is adaptation, essentially.
So thank you for all that. I think that's really great. And for me, part of the problem has been that when we collectively are attempting to solve the problem, whatever that means, we're solving for the wrong variable. We have confused what is the dependent and independent, what are the dependent and independent variables. In that, the thing that must be protected at all costs is the economy. And that is literally insane in terms of being out of touch with physical reality, because the natural world must be primary, because without a natural world, you don't have any economy whatsoever. And so when they talk in 1990, Bill McKibben, who has done a lot to raise awareness about global warming, sort of precisely manifests the problem, because all of his books are about what we need to do to save civilization. It's not about saving the Danube. It's not about saving salmon. It's not about saving blue whales. It's about saving civilization or saving the economy. So all of this stuff is attempting to maintain an economy for just a little bit longer. And that's one part of the problem. And the other part, I'll try to make this as short as possible. I'm going to use the P word, patriarchy. And part of the problem here is a fundamental valuing of what humans create with our minds over what nature creates and what women create with their bodies. So a long time ago, men realized, we all realize that women give birth. Women produce something that is of inherent value. And that's great, so long as men recognize their role is fairly minimal in that particular process. But the problem comes when men have to decide that we are superior to women. Well, if women can create, this one guy said this great line to me, and he was being ironic or being sarcastic about it. He said, if women can create life and men can destroy it, who is the more powerful? And so part of the problem is that all of this stuff is more important to us than life. And it's, frankly, I think that a lot of it is because of like womb envy. A lot of it is just because we got to be more special. Anyway, so I think we're trying to save the wrong thing.
Yeah, just talking about limits to growth and, oh, sorry. Okay, it was in the 70s, early in the 70s, and at that time there was a Bretton Woods Treaty which just detached money from some physical entity, namely God. So that was the turbo start of a new era of capitalism called turbo capitalism, which really didn't acknowledge any limits, and it just grew like hell, and it led to the situation that we are in today. So it was exactly at the time when the Club of Rome warned that word how not to do things, and they did exactly the opposite, and just liberated this or unleashed this train of capitalism that led to the present situation. So it was interesting to how fast this process took place within 50 years. It was just the anniversary of the limits to growth.
A little more than 50 years. It was in
and 72. The game is
72.
over, or almost over. So that was even not seen by the authors of that book, that it will happen that fast. Everything is going faster than expected, as you mentioned.
You know what is capitalism? It's buying things that we don't need with money that we don't have to impress people we don't like.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let's talk about a buzzword of this transition, energy transition. This is a renewable energy source. Just elaborate on the meaning of this very fancy term that is in the center of this energy, this hypothesized energy transition. So it suggests that everything is fine, everything is okay because it's renewable, it provides you endless, limitless energy. So it's something that do not make the people think, use their brains to think of the limits of all these stuff that are planned to replace fossil fuels. What do you think of that?
So two things. One is Ozzie Zenner in his brilliant book, Green Illusions, doesn't call them renewable energy, calls them alternative fossil fuels, because they require fossil fuels at every point in their production, transportation, use, and disposal. That's the first thing. The other thing is I want to very quickly mention Jevons paradox. Jevons was an economist, 1850s, 1860s, somewhere in there, who studied the coal question. His question was, so if coal use becomes more efficient, will that decrease the demand for coal? Because if you make more efficient coal stoves, then it's going to decrease the use, right? Because I only have to use one piece of coal instead of two to heat dinner. What he found was the opposite, that if you increase fuel efficiency, it increases demand because people find more uses for it. Now you can use it for, you can expand your manufacturing capacity. You could, if coal price was a limiting factor for you making textiles, you can make 3 times the textiles. And so it actually increases demand. And the way that applies to all of these fuels is all through human use of history. First, it started with human muscle, and then animal muscle, and then what do we add next? Wood, and then we add, after that, eventually coal, hydro, everything. None of those have ever decreased all the others. Every time you add a fuel source, it increases the use of all the previous ones because people or corporations now, find new uses. So every time, even if wind and solar would actually be good for the world, they still would not and have not decreased fossil fuel use.
Yeah, it's interesting to cite Jevons. He was one of the first economists, I think the smartest of the lot. He could be a colleague of mine, maybe a system scientist, would shake hands. Maybe we'd do that in paradise or in hell, wherever the economists go. And anyway, he had this big intuition, dynamic intuition. And because he understood, I think, that there are no solutions to what we define as problems. I repeat, there is only adaptation. You have coal, and coal, you use it. You use it and not to solve problems, because you create more problems with coal than you solve them. And so you adapt. And it is the same thing with renewable energy. It is not a solution of anything. If you state, as people do, that the problem is to continue economic growth, then it's a bad definition of the problems, which has no solution. If you say we adapt to the transition using renewable energy as well, as much as we can, to help people in real life, help people. You need energy. You all need energy. Your children, your grandchildren, they need energy, and it depends how far back you want to go. If you don't use fossil fuels, you don't use renewable energy, you don't use technology, then you go back even earlier than Middle Ages. Maybe you heard of the Olduvai scenario. Have you heard of that? Olduvai scenario was a name given, return to hunting and gathering, which is fine. It's a lot of fun. I personally am an archer. I love archery. But the problem is that I don't find many mammoths or bison around my home. So I'm forced to shoot at rubber animals, which is a bit, my ancestors would have been a bit disappointed with me. I think they're looking from me from the sky. So what are you shooting arrows against rubber things? But anyway, and so we need to use what we have the best we can to help people to survive the transition. And that's, I think, renewable energy can help us a lot in that.
So, I have a 1 hour and a half talk about what you asked. But before going into details, I think one main problem is that the society is totally biophysically illiterate. I mean, we are not aware that everything we depend on materials, on energy, on water and land. And this is a typical story, that you ask a kid where the milk comes from, from the, I don't know in English the word, but from the supermarket, So, and this happens at the world society, people are not aware where things come from. So I think for pedagogy of collapse, I don't know, I haven't read the books, but I think that will be basic, that people understand and know. And many people tell me, no, this is very difficult, I don't know, but then I meet people who know very geek stuff, very complicated, maybe not very useful for the survival. So I think there is a lot of capacity which is not used. So this is first thing. So when I hear the question, which I really like, renewable energy sources, and I can show some examples. The European Union says we are going to increase the renewable energies to increase our sovereignty. And this is so absurd because the energies are captured by material systems. Where are coming these materials? If you are replacing one dependency or one vulnerability by another one, which is just a second step. You don't need to go too far in the system. So when they are telling you these type of things and selling to society, the transition to renewables as a increasing sovereignty, then this is a starting point. So, well, there is problem with materials. Materials you cannot recycle 100% because of thermodynamic laws, and also because when you want to have high performance, you need high purity. And high purity means mining, because when you recycle, you put everything together, you melt, you do your best, you never reach very high purity because it's polluted, let's say. So there are a lot of applications, I don't have the numbers, but a lot where you need high purity. So this connects with circular economy.
High tech needs high purity materials in general. So, okay, what about the fact that decarbonization or this transition is taking place only in a kind of private sector? It's just like solar panels or electric cars that are part of this transitional business, but the big sectors like the big four industrial sectors are not even attempted to be electrified or decarbonized. There was an attempt in Sweden to launch a steel factory by 2026, by next year, but it was postponed to 2045 because of technological problems with hydrogen. So that's the only attempt to try to decarbonize big sectors that consume actually much of the energy that mankind is using.
Okay, so I can continue. I mean, the green growth strategy for transition relies mainly on solar PV and wind, because when you look to renewable options, theoretically you have a lot of options. But when you look to the options with the potential, how much they can give, at the end you only end up, depending also on the country, if the country has a lot of mountains, wind and solar. Wind and solar provide electricity. Okay? So that's the reason that green growth is totally coupled with the electrification, because if you produce a lot of electricity, but you don't consume, because in countries as in Europe, the consumption of electricity is maybe 20 or 25%. So you are asking about the 75%, which is if we remove transport, but the majority, which is that's the reason that hydrogen, at least in Europe now, is a topic, because hydrogen is the solution for many, it's thought to be the solution for many applications where you cannot electrify. Why? Because electricity can be very good for many things, but it's not good for everything that is heavy and everything that you need to go far. So everything related with heavy transport, freight transport. Electricity is not good for high temperature. So you can do with electricity and heat pumps, they are thinking maybe until 500 degrees, maybe. They are not now so far. But there are a lot of processes that you need more than 500 degrees. For example, manufacturing PV panels, making steel, which are necessary for all the renewables. So what to do in these cases? That's the reason of hydrogen. The logic is to indirectly electrify. So you produce electricity with wind and solar because it's what they do. Then you feed an electrolyzer. Electrolyzer is a machine basically that with electricity and the atmosphere will generate hydrogen. And then hydrogen, if you combine with chemistry, advanced chemistry with carbon, you have H and C. So hydrogen and carbon, this is synthetic hydrocarbons. So you are synthetically producing, you can produce liquids like diesel, biodiesel, if you, no, sorry, e-diesel or e-gasoline. And with that, it will be a perfect replacement, theoretically, for all the applications.
But at what cost?
Yeah, the problem is that you are indirectly electrifying with a machine which is 60% efficient if it works. Because now the electrolyzers are in a very in research state for feeding this type of, this amount of energy. You need huge electrolyzers, and we don't know still how to work. These machines do not exist. And the business model, as you mentioned, totally inexistent. I was a bit long, sorry.
Okay. Andras, you allow me a little criticism to you and the community of climate scientists, because you are using so much this term, decarbonization, which in my opinion is not the right term, my personal opinion. It's not, because it tells you that everything that is not carbon is good, which is like, 2 legs bad, 4 legs good in the animal farm. It's oversimplified. And one of the consequences, I think, is to have generated this monstrosity with hydrogen energy, which is a monster, a ghost. It's a horrible idea, doesn't work, will never work, and we should not even think to use it. I would use defossilize, or something like that, because after all, we are all made of carbon, so I would not exaggerate with decarbonization.
So I loved what both of you said, and I want to just add a little bit to what you said about how the attempts to decarbonize, and I really love what you said about that, to decarbonize rely mainly on wind and solar. I think there's 2 other sources that we need to add, which are pixie dust and unicorn farts. Because it's all nonsense. It's just, and then also, I just want to mention one thing, and if either of you real scientists, I'm a scientist, but my degree was like 40 years ago, I don't remember anything. So if one of you real scientists could take over the energy capacity, what is it? Diesel versus batteries. The numbers on that, I believe, diesel is
12,000 watt hours. This is for diesel, and 240, this is for the best battery, lithium-ion battery.
Yeah, so
that's 60, a factor of 60.
So if you have a semi-tractor that hauls I don't know, sorry, I'm one of those damn Americans who can't do the metric stuff, that can haul 60,000 pounds, which is, 7 kilograms or something? That was a joke, I know it's more than 7. Okay, so 60,000 pounds for 600 miles to have the same amount run by batteries to carry the same payload, I think you could go 60 miles. which is 4 kilometers. Anyway, so the point is that you can't, even if you wanted to decarbonize. And then the last thing that I wanted to say about this is that, and I love the bit about decarbonization, is the thing that a lot of people, a lot of the economists don't ask is, even if you could do all this, what are you using the energy for? You're just using the energy to destroy more stuff, to build more dams, to build more highways, and frankly, I don't think that Przewalski's horses care whether the automobiles are being driven on gasoline, diesel, pixie dust, or electric cars. It doesn't matter. It's still more stuff that, what was it you said? Can you please say it again? Stuff we don't want to impress, you said more. Stuff we don't have with money we don't have, stuff.
To buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like.
Which would be great if they were fueled by solar.
I didn't invent it. Somebody did.
That brings us to the issue of limitless energy, which many people think that exists. There are some conspiracy theories like Tesla already invented unlimited energy, and he was killed. But now people are thinking of fusion as a limitless source, and the media are often bringing up news of new records, hitting new records like 5 seconds in a plasma state in the test facility every second year, because in between the whole facility needs to be rebuilt because the 150 million degrees just burns or evaporates everything. So that's why the records are not broken every day or every second, but just every second year, because that's absolutely nonsense. So that's what is your opinion about this limitless energy of fusion, which is a kind of hype? It was hype when I was young. I was told that it will be ready in 40 years, and now it's the same. It's 40 years ahead of us always. So it's the technology of the future. What do you think of that? And what if there is the humanity has limitless energy? I think that would be a total catastrophe if we have access to unlimited energy and we can destroy the rest of the planet that we left for ourselves.
First off, the Easter Bunny is going to bring me a pony for Christmas. Second, that's the idea of limitless energy is one of the problems of focusing only on energy, because we are not merely facing peak oil. We are facing peak nickel. We are facing peak
copper,
peak soil, peak copper. If we collectively had infinite energy, what's the number on how much less nutritious vegetables are today than they were 60 years ago? It's like they're 40% as nutritious or 20%. I mean, the soil is gone, and the soil doesn't come back. And it's the same with, all these other, we could name all sorts of other limits. So great, this culture does create limitless energy. That is a catastrophe, I agree. And I think blue whales would agree, and I think that everybody on the planet except for us would agree. And second, there are a bazillion other limits that we run into that would all have to be conquered in just as fantastic and pixie dust sort of way. I'm done.
Yeah, I think you are all smart people. You don't have to hear me to tell you what propaganda is. If you are here, you know what is propaganda. And the emphasis we see now on nuclear energy, fusion technology, especially in Italy. We have now the government telling us, oh, we don't need renewables, we just go nuclear right away, right now, which is so transparent for me. I don't know, for you, it's why I say, no, wait, if you could hear what they have in mind, they would tell you just, oh, we know it's crap, excuse me. We are just trying to keep using fossil fuels as long as we can. Then I have no particular objection against nuclear energy. It works, may produce energy. We have central nuclear energy in Spain, for instance, which work. And I'm afraid now that where we are going now, we won't be able to manage nuclear energy because we are going to shrink our knowledge base, population base, energy and competency. Already now, we are in big trouble to maintain some energy systems. Just one quick note. Before becoming a collapsologist, I didn't know I was, but Balazs told me today, so I found myself into a club that I'm not sure that I would join a club that accepts people like me as members, but that was Oscar Wilde. Anyway, serious, I was a technologist before being and I worked mainly with turbine engines, which are very complicated technology, gas turbines. And it's a difficult technology. And in the period, about 20 years of work on turbine technology, you see the difficulty you had to maintain a highly sophisticated system in the face of losing competency. You could not find people able to keep the system working. Imagine a much more complicated nuclear central. It's an enormous complication. I was just reading yesterday about a report about the Chinese built a thorium-fueled, molten salt, cooled nuclear reactor. And they say it works. I'm sure it does. But can you think how much it costs to maintain the technology, the people, the knowledge? It's not something for us anymore. That's gone. It's out. We need simpler things. Even if fusion could work, I don't think so. But it would need an infrastructure because it's not just people say, oh, I can fuse deuterium. I have infinite energy. It doesn't work that way. You need an infrastructure that allows you to create, say, it doesn't work with deuterium, you need tritium, and you need a huge supply of subsystems, which our society will be soon unable to produce. And that's the limit. Then maybe there will be another cycle in the future when we will go nuclear for good, but not now.
Okay, so attending to your question about what will happen if there will be infinite energy. So here my reaction is, this is impossible. I mean, for me, I'm blocked at this point. Thermodynamically, I hope not to be too technical, but we are an open system. We need energy to inflow. So we are in a limited biosphere, unlimited energy is impossible. So I don't think it's too useful to explore that. I mean, that's my view. We have to accept and to learn and everybody be aware that energy is limited. In terms of technology, well, I'm not expert. I have never deepened on these technologies, but for me, why? The problem is now. So if the solution may be coming in 40 years, I'm not interested. Because it's not part of the solution. The problem is now. So that for me, I end the story also here. About technology, what happened? I mean, there is a lot of news, no? Every day, graphene, new technology. Why this is happening? I think there are many reasons. I can talk about the more related with energy and economy, the system of technology, but I know there are also psychological reasons. So, but what happens? People are researching some technologies for years, which maybe are promising, but you need to invest a lot of money. So I have some friends working in this type of fields, and for me, it's amazing how companies of over 100 people are financed with excellent salaries for decades. Where is this money coming from? The money is coming because they need to publish every 6 months some news showing that that will provide money, because rich people who are financing that, because they are wealthy, they say, okay, I need to finance this, and maybe in 10 years I will. So there is a hype because of the perverse system of incentives for science and technology. I think this is very, very important also to have in mind.
Yes, that brings us to the last question, because we are closing this session soon. So I just wonder, as a scientist, what the role of science is in getting here, and also as part of the solution. Because nowadays I just find in the top scientific journals papers that do not make any sense. For example, last fall, there was a paper by Swiss scientists from ETH Zurich, which is a top institution in the world in terms of technology, that we should inject 5 million tons of diamonds into the sky in order to stop global warming, and it appeared in Science. And I am ashamed as a scientist that such a bullshit came out from these Swiss scientists, recognized Swiss scientists. That's exactly the mechanism that you mentioned, that they have to publish, they have to apply for grants, even for bullshit. They are doing research which they know, I guess they know that do not make any sense, but they just get it published, and the media put it into the headlines, so that comes for the public, that solution is already there. So 5 million tons of diamonds each year. So that's a solution really to the climate problem. So that's, and in Science, you can read it in Science. So that's the end of the world. To me, that's absolutely bullshit. Squared, or to the power of whatever. So that's amazing that that's how the world actually works, and science is in the forefront of this bullshit generation, and the media takes advantage of all these papers coming out and just magnifies them and puts them to the headlines just to make people think that everything is on track and everything will be solved, and just do and buy and shop and whatever. So that's exactly to maintain the illusion of this modernity that forever. So I think it's a responsibility of science just to refuse these bullshit things and do not get involved into. And I don't think that Swiss scientists are just lacking money or just need these grants to survive. So they just take it for, I don't know why. And they publish this bullshit and why the top science, the top journal accept these bullshit? That's another question. Why does it appear in these prestigious journals? Because science is diluted very much. So there is really a kind of tsunami of papers coming out with making no sense. There are predatory journals and all these, and now it's made by artificial intelligence. All these papers are just produced and read and reviewed by artificial intelligence. So I will lose my job soon, because all the cycle will be done by AI. But just joke apart, what do you think of the role of science in these difficult times?
Yeah, so, well, I'm working in science, so I'm, how to say, very aligned with what everything you said. I'm very worried. I'm getting students who would like to do PhD, who see this very early alone, who decide not to do any more research because they think that the field, I mean, the science system is just not functional. So, you know, this is the lack of, if the smart, the nice people are detecting this, and instead of wanting to join, to try to help, solve, no, they say no. So this for me is a red alarm because it's very clear. There is a lot of publications, a lot of them are bullshit, and even less and less reading, because Hugo said nobody reads books, but who reads papers? No, it's really a problem.
Artificial intelligence.
And then there is another problem. This example of science I didn't know, but what did the reviewers? No, they didn't do their job. That's not me. No, I know, but I want to say, I'm not accusing at all, but I'm just pointing another element of the science system, which peer review should be. Peer review is the fact that a colleague is checking that what you are saying makes sense. That is not bullshit, no? And if someone detects that, the editor needs to stop. So in all these articles that you see, that we are finding, the problem is that peer review is also failing. So why is failing peer review? I mean, we could go like that over and over, no? But I think one problem is that people are focused on producing. It's not producing stuff, but it's producing papers, and not so much caring about the system of science anymore.
But it's a moral question, I guess, to publish something that is bullshit. I think that I will never make it. So I don't understand the motive of the scientists to publish this bullshit.
I don't know this case, but I know cases about renewables where there are conflict of interest. People who are working in the research, collaborating with some companies, laboratories. I mean, when you are in the topic, you recognize the affiliations. So there are conflicts of interest in some cases. In this case, I don't know. There is maybe also bad practice, but.
Okay, very quickly, because I think we are over, but about this question of spraying awful things in the atmosphere to solve the problem of climate change, I can cite something that the creator of the science that today we call system dynamics was some person named Jay Forrester. He was a researcher at the MIT in Boston, and he was a genius in many ways. He was the inspirator of the limits to growth. And on this point, I think it is relevant something that he said. And he said, complex systems normally have leverage points. Leverage point means these points which you can, if you touch them, you change the system. It's like a horse. If you want to move a horse in a certain direction, you don't push the whole horse. You have reins to move the horse in that direction. And the point that he made, which is hugely interesting, look it over in the internet or ask to your favorite AI, and you can, leverage point is easy to determine. In this case, it is warming. But people almost always act on the leverage point in the wrong way, worsening the problem. And this is what's happening. You have a warming problem, pollution, you want to solve it with more pollution. It's unthinkable. It's simply stupid. It doesn't work. And unfortunately, this is the way science works. But there is a good point. We will be soon replaced by artificial intelligences, so don't worry about that. They are much smarter than us.
So very quickly, two things. One is Robert J. Lifton, probably the world's foremost authority on the psychology of genocide. In his book, called the Nazi doctors, he asked how it was that men who had taken the Hippocratic Oath could work in death camps. And there were some like Mengele who were just sadists. But others actually, he found, cared profoundly for the health of the inmates. And they would do everything they could to help their health. They would give them a tiny bit of extra food, or they would hide them from the selection officers who were going to kill them, or they would let them rest for a day or two. They would do everything they could except for the most important thing of all, which is to question the existence of the death camp itself. So within the constraints of that larger system that was working them to death, that was gassing them to death, they would do what they could. So without questioning the system itself, let's throw diamonds in the air. That's a great fucking idea. And the other way to look at this is, I don't know if I'm the only person in this room who's ever been in a really bad relationship. Okay, I'm feeling kind of vulnerable now. But let's pretend that at least one of you has been in a bad relationship. One of the things we do is we attempt to hold on to that relationship as long as we can, as everyone around us says, you know, there's this red flag or two that I see. It's like, why are you trying to ruin my perfect relationship? My point is that we as humans have a tremendous capacity for denial, and we will do anything to maintain a current system, no matter how crappy it is. And the last thing I'll say, I promise we'll quit after this, or I'll quit after this, is that I was talking to a stream biologist, a fisheries biologist, about streams. She said, when there's a flood, it breaks her heart. When the river changes course, it breaks her heart because there's fish die, deer die, frogs die, a lot of creatures die. But it also makes her really happy because this is how a river creates new habitat. And she said, every time there's a flood, there's short-term habitat loss and long-term habitat gain. And when she said that to me, it slapped me in the face. Why do we stay in bad relationships? Why do we stay in bad jobs? It's always fear of short-term habitat loss for long-term habitat gain. And I think that's why they're throwing diamonds in the air.
Okay, that's concludes our session now, and I thank all of you to contribute to this talk, which I hope that you found interesting. And that's the end of this second session, and I now hand the floor over to Balázs.
Well, thank you very much for you all, and I can only hope that you also realized what I cannot appreciate enough, that in the last 2 hours, there were giants on this stage. And they had an opportunity to bring the reality of collapsology a little bit closer to you. And as one of my colleagues mentioned it earlier, considering how our world is, because that's why we are here, because we have an idea about it, probably this is the last chance we could meet them in person. But altogether in one group, there's an even higher chance we might not see them again. So I hope we all appreciate this opportunity. So please take the chance. After this session, we'll have a little break and socializing. Approach them, talk to them, get your books signed if you didn't do yet. Because all of them will be speakers of the World Adaptation Forum conference tomorrow. And beside the foreign speakers, there are the Hungarian speakers here as well. András Gelencsér, Ferenc Jordán, and Cornélia Radics are here among us as well. So please approach them, talk to them, and seize the opportunity. But most of all, what I really appreciate is you, your attention, and your time. Because if there's any quote I really like and make difference in my life, says that The only thing we can decide is what to do with the time that was given us. Thank you very much for your attention.